Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us today. I think that we can start. My name is Wilfried B. I'm the permanent observer of IRENA to the United Nations. I will be guiding you through these official side events of IRENA, titled Beyond the Talk, Financing Renewable Energy to Fuel the SDGs. We have the honor to organize these events with the support, the sponsorship of the UAE mission to the UN, and we thank you for your hospitality today, and also with the German mission to the UN. We are going to have a video message today from the State Parliamentary Secretary, and we are happy to have the Germany mission represented in this room today. We also welcome all those who connect online, who connect on YouTube, who connect on Zoom. Please note that those of you who connect on Zoom can ask questions. Just send your question in the chat box. We'll be happy to take them after all the interventions today. Dear participants, the latest SDG tracking report reaffirmed that financing for SDG 7 and other SDGs is clearly not enough to be in line with the 2030 agenda and the Paris Agreement. The majority of the developing world still faces great challenges in mobilizing resources for critically needed energy projects ranging from electrifying health clinics to powering industry and development. These challenges were prominent even before the pandemic, but subsequently, the fiscal space for recovery and sustainable development efforts became further constrained by additional obstacles to access financing, limited public and private investment, and continuing debt service obligations. Our event today brings together various stakeholders from the financing sector, governments, international organizations, and the private sector to discuss the landscape of financing instruments to support renewable energy projects implementations with a focus on developing countries and the energy transition as a whole while benefiting multiple SDGs. So we look forward to a fruitful discussion today. We have here Mr. Francesco Lacamera, Director General of IRENA. We have also the Deputy Permanent Representative of the UAE to the UN, His Excellency Mohammed Abu Shahab. And as panelists, we have Mr. Riccardo Politi, the Vice President of the World Bank for Infrastructure. We have Mrs. Duarte, which is the Special Advisor for Africa, your UN Special Advisor for Africa, but we also have Mr. Hamed Badr, the Director for Project Facilitation and Support, and we have Mrs. Preeti Sina, who is the Executive Secretary of the UN Capital Development Funds, UNCDF. So I think that we have enough people today to have a very fruitful discussions. We are going to start with His Excellency, Mr. Mohammed Abu Shahab, who is going to deliver his keynote remarks. But before that, I would like to thank you once again for hosting us in this beautiful venue. And we hope that this is just the first step in our collaboration here in New York. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. And Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's really a pleasure to welcome you all at the permanent mission of the United Arab Emirates, including those of you who are joining us remotely online. We're delighted to co-host today's event jointly with IRENA and the permanent mission of Germany, with a focus on renewable energy finance. We have an enormous pool of expertise among us, and our hope is that for this afternoon is that we can identify some concrete steps to sharply scale up renewable energy over the next year. We're just 5 months away from COP27, 6 months from the next IRENA General Assembly, and next year is the start of the UAE's presidency of COP28. So this is a great time to share perspectives and try to identify a few priorities that can be reflected in our near-term programs and budgets. The stark context at this year's HLPF is that climate change is worsening, the pandemic continues, and we're now facing an energy and food crisis. But the critical frame for today, and certainly for the UAE's presidency of COP28 next year, is that renewable energy is an economic opportunity that does not need to be motivated by negative factors alone. Yes, it is a defense against climate change, but renewable energy is also fundamentally a positive choice. As IRENA has extensively documented, renewables offer an exceptional investment for economic growth and job creation in every corner of the globe. In the UAE, for instance, we're very proud that our policies and investments have made our solar power the cheapest in the world. Even in the heart of the hydrocarbon industry, renewables are now the economic preference. Tellingly, the UAE's strategic initiative to reach net zero by 2050 is enabled by this ultra-low-cost solar, which reduces our costs and increases our competitiveness. But as we all know, physical deployment is often slower than economics. That's not to say that renewables aren't doing well. In fact, investments in renewables increased drastically even at the height of the pandemic. However, we're still not fully capitalizing on the technology's economic potential, and finance is not flowing to the sector at sufficient volume or pace. For the UAE's part, I'd like to highlight 3 areas that we think are important for progress over the next year. First, because renewables are now so cost-effective, they should largely be financed by private rather than public sources. To accelerate this shift, we would like to see international financial institutions set new metrics to leverage private finance for renewables. $1 of IFI finance should, at minimum, be mobilizing $1 of private finance. Such metrics would provide a good incentive for reform and private sector engagement. Second, and related, we'd like to see a much greater shift into de-risking instruments. The UAE has provided more than $1.5 billion in grants and soft loans for renewable energy projects in over 50 countries, including more than 30 small island development states. In each case, we found that it's the practical ground-level tasks like securing land rights, identifying grid connection points, and completing environmental impact assessments that have been our greatest value add in supporting government agencies and utilities. This is the work that the private sector is unwilling to do in many developing countries because it implies risk. But when these risks are removed, money flows more readily. We are pleased that IRENA's Climate Investment Platform and Energy Transition Accelerator Financing Platform are increasing the focus on these de-risking tools. And I know we'll be hearing more about the ETAF platform shortly. Third, we think it's important that governments themselves set timelines for potential projects. This reassures the private sector and international investors that there is a long-term opportunity and that they should spend the time and money to participate in that market. This can make the greatest difference in developing countries where private finance is most lagging. These ideas are, of course, just the tip of the iceberg, and we look forward to hearing about other potential priorities. Coordinated action to scale up renewables is one of the best investments we can make for the climate, the SDGs, and our recovery from conflicts and the pandemic. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and also thank you for mentioning the issue of cost. I have to say that IRENA issued a report today on cost, and that report confirms the trend in renewable energy is less and less expensive. That's what the report confirms, and this is not the first year. It's actually in confirmation of what we already know. So we concur with that it's time to take advantage of that decreasing cost of renewable energy. So now I have the pleasure of giving the floor to Mr. Francesco La Camera, Director General of IRENA. You have the floor.
So thank you, Wilfred. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me join the ambassador in welcoming you to this official event of the 2022 High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development that is happening today in a hybrid form. Naturally, so thanks to the United Emirates and Germany for supporting this event. So renewable energy installed capacity have continued to grow steadily, but have remained far below the level that are needed to bring emissions down to net zero by mid-century. So if we see that direction travel is clear, and we are moving to a new energy system that will be largely based on renewables and complemented by hydrogen, mainly green, and sustainable biomass, the speed and the scale of this transition is not coherent with the achievement of the Paris Agreement goals. So we need to accelerate this path, and also we need to ensure that the energy transition may move to ensure also equality among countries and ensure benefits to all countries. This is not happening too, and according to our latest data, in 2021, about 84% of the investment in renewable energy and the energy transition were focused in China, Europe, the United States, Japan, and India. And Africa is accounting only for no more than 2% of the total. To make clear how this transition is not only on the scale and speed needed, but still happening unequally in the world. According to our IRENA 1.5 Celsius pathway, is our World Energy Transition Outlook that came in March this year. We need investment of 5.7 trillion of US dollar per year until 2030, including the imperative to redirect 0.7 trillion of US dollar annually away from fossil fuel. This is what we need to do from now to 2030. And this is very easy to comment that we are trying to repeat any time as possible, that looking for technologies that cannot produce result in this decade is not the most effective way to fight climate change. And we have many times made clear that we have the technologies, but we have to invest in providing an acceleration in this process. Also because investing in the new energy system is not only good for being coherent with the Paris Agreement goal, with the achievement of, but is also good for the economy. So we make clear how the GDP will enjoy if we go for accelerating the energy transition. It's good also from a social point of view, because it's the way to get from investment more jobs. And now I think there is a strong argument to accelerate the speed and scale of the transition, is that it's now too evident to everyone our old energy centralized system based on fossil fuel is not reliable anymore. It cannot support development around the world. And energy security is now coming from renewables, not from the traditional fuel. I think this is another element that make evident that we have to accelerate this path. So this short-term intervention addressing the current crisis must be accompanied by a steadfast focus on mid- and long-term goals of the energy transition. Several key constraints impede investment from the private sector. While power generation costs have fallen significantly for most renewable energy technologies in recent years, high financing costs represent a major barrier to scaling up renewable energy investments. Wilfred has already mentioned a report that is coming out today. Yeah? And what is coming from this report is in the last 3 years, we have assisted to a decrease in the cost of renewables by 2-digit for 3 years in a row. This is amazing. If you consider all is happening around the world, it's absolutely amazing. So, but the financing costs are relevant, the risking is needed. This is why IRENA, together with the support of United Arab Emirates, launched in the occasion of the COP26 in Glasgow, the Energy Transition Accelerator Financing Platform, it's called ITAF, a new global finance facility to accelerate the transition to renewable energy. And on this, I think Ahmed will speak later on. There are only 2 comments that I want to present to you. One is why we think IRENA can play this role of matchmaking, or how we can facilitate in a most effective way this process. One of the barriers naturally are financing, but what we see also that we have no sufficient planning. When a multilateral financial institution is going to produce their support for the country, they are providing for loans and other, one of the costs that they have to do this is to have a clear understanding on the situation. So we as ARENA, we are moving from the global outlook that we will save to the regional transition outlook, just to provide to multilateral financial institutions a more precise indication of what is needed in terms of investment in the different technologies, what are the policies that are needed, what could be the economic impact, social economic impact, and this to be tailored with realities that they have to, and this, in our point of view, will diminish dramatically the transition cost for any subject, any entity that want to invest or mobilize resource for the energy transition. So the ITAF has also play a role in this context. So work on a funding project that in the context of planet initiative that are agreed by countries. So the countries has to be behind supporting the planning process, so they have to own the process. So the project from the government side or private side are something that the governments are ready to support, to speed up procedure, the authorization, open bidding that are transparent and other. And this is where ARENA will try to play his role in making the difference as much as possible. And on this, my last comment is on the investment forum that we are going to organize. The first one will be in Indonesia, and this is, investment forum were always been part of our plan when we have been launched the Climate Investment Platform. I think we are using Climate Investment Platform ITAF. I have to clarify what is the difference. The Climate Investment Platform has been established to try to build a consistent pipeline of projects that now is there. We have it. And also to have partners that can be a call for on a case by case to find interest in the project and provide funding if needed. And the investment forum could be also an opportunity for meeting in person, presenting projects, trying to find interest and other. We have already tried to work on the Climate Investment Platform also in this virtual mode, and we have been able to matchmaking some projects for Africa, and we will do more in the future. The investment forum will provide further opportunities. The difference between the CFP and the ITAF is that in the ITAF, the partner will commit an envelope. So this will provide us a minimum amount of money, but it is there, is ready, and that they can come from different options. We can have the concessional loans, we can have equity, we can have market loans, and IRENA will try to maximize the benefit of the different actors that will be part of this initiative and vision of IRENA and the UAE in the establishment. So I hope this could be interesting. We will work on this in the next year. We just wanted to provide you with the right information on this, and we'll be ready in case to answer to your questions.
Thank you very much, Francesco, for mentioning the socio-economic impact of renewables. And that reminds us that renewable energy is important for the people, the planet, and for prosperity. Thank you for mentioning also the investment forums you are going to organize. Now, I would like to request a video message from the State Parliamentary Secretary to the Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany, Dr. Barbel Koffler. She wanted to join us today in person, but she was not able to do so. So we are going to have a video message for her.
Renewable energies guarantee security and development. They diversify the energy mix, reduce dependence on imports, and increase access to energy and energy security. That is why Germany and Team Europe are promoting energy access and the energy transition worldwide, and thus make an important contribution to a sustainable energy supply in line with needs and also to global climate action. The energy transition must be socially just so that it promotes sustainable development and fosters new economic development opportunities. In the sense of it being a just transition, it is also an opportunity for gender equality because women and girls in particular benefit greatly from modern and sustainable access to energy. The BMZ will continue to support its partner countries through a comprehensive bilateral, regional, and global portfolio, and also through multilateral instruments. Energy is already one of the largest areas of support in German development cooperation, and closing the financing gap is a key priority. Through the German Development Bank, we are supporting our partners worldwide in investing in a sustainable and reliable energy supply, in energy-saving measures, and in grid connections and access, including for the disadvantaged. Since 2016, we have invested 5.7 billion euros in renewable energies via KfW. Furthermore, with the help of GIZ, we are providing partner countries with political and technical advice to assist them in creating the necessary framework for the transformation of their energy systems and in building local capacities for implementing the energy transition. We are supporting the global energy transition multilaterally through a number of institutions and funds. We see a particularly important role for multilateral development banks, which can use their policy-based financing instruments to help shape the political framework for an ambitious transformation. Under the multi-donor Global Energy Transformation Programme, we are working with the EU and other donors to support the mobilization of finance to achieve the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement through the rapid expansion of renewable energies. As of June 2022, nearly 90 projects and companies were successfully matched with financiers, which adds up to a projected investment volume of approximately 1.3 billion euros. A reduction in GHG emissions of 1.9 million tons carbon dioxide per year, and access to energy for nearly 50 million people. But we need to do even more. That is why we are stepping up our support for just energy transition partnerships and climate partnerships, also jointly with our G7 partners. Therefore, I'm looking forward to exchange and cooperation in this and in other forums. The only way we can master the challenge is by working together.
we thank Germany for this message of the State Secretary, and that will conclude the first session of this side event. I will now invite the panelists to join me on the podium. I would like to invite Mr. Hamed Badr, the Director for Project Facilitation and Support at IRENA, Mr. Riccardo Polizzi, the Vice President of the World Bank for Infrastructure, Ms. Cristina Duarte, USG and Special Advisor for Africa, and Ms. Preeti Sinha, the Executive Secretary for UN Capital Development Fund. The speaker will inform us of the initiatives to support SDG 7 financing to fuel the 2030 agenda. I would like to just to mention that because of time constraints, we will be grateful if you can limit your intervention to 5-7 minutes. I will not waste much time. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Hamed Badr. We have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Wilfred. So, well, it's a bit of a difficulty for me to present in front of my two masters, the former one, Riccardo, and my current one, Francesco, because they are sharing the same vision, but I learned how to be a good banker by both of them. So to the point, with these 5 to 7 minutes, there are 4 important facts I have to share regarding the ITAF platform. Number 1 is that IRENA is not a bank and will never be a bank by its mandate, but basically is working on the missing link that His Excellency Ambassador Mohammed Abu Shahab mentioned today, that there are always, as also Francesco mentioned, a high transaction cost and basically high transaction time. I remember that when I was in the EBRD with part of Riccardo's team there at that time, that more important how to be agile, providing free, in a very short time, very good bankable project, because land rights clearance and environmental impact assessment, infrastructure, among others, is really a key point that always putting the barriers. And from climate investment platform, as Francesco mentioned today also, in a very quick way, that from 330 projects we received to support under CIB during pandemic, we only got 9 projects, basically workable and bankable, in order for several banks to start to consider financing them, including World Bank and as well as Islamic Development Bank, Masdar, Abu Dhabi Fund. So that's exactly the challenge we have, which is always increasing, and this put the barriers for how ITAF is going to work, but we are working, as I'm going to present in the coming 5 minutes, how does it work. So in a very simple way, ITAF basically is going to work among several partners, and the anchor investor is coming from Abu Dhabi Fund for Development with $400 million that have been announced during COP26, as Francesco mentioned. But the other important point that we are doing that based on the competitive advantage of several factors here by UEE and IRENA. Number 1 is that basically there are huge accumulated experience by ADFD or Abu Dhabi Fund for Development in behalf of United Arab Emirates government for over more than 50 years of accumulated supporting projects, because here we are talking about projects, mainly projects that basically look in the interest of the banks. The second issue is the global footprint that IRENA has over more than 175 countries that we are operating through these countries, but also the other important factor that the knowledge we have through several financial products, as well as our presence in the ground represented by also what we do in supporting countries, each specific country for each specific national context of renewable energy barriers and basically readiness. For example, just to give one example, what we have over past decade, what we call it renewable readiness assessment, which basically give an overlook for what is the renewable energy readiness of the country and how can we scale up this investment. So adding to this more investment financing and flow financing, I think it will serve very well COP27 and COP28, as Francesco mentioned today, but also will helping flowing more investment specifically coming from private sector. The final point actually that we add now adding when basically our DG took office is basically that we have now the concrete knowledge with a global part of bankers around the globe in order to ensure that bankability is always there, so that when we bring this project into banks, starting with World Bank, African Development Bank, or regional banks, or any other private sector partners. We are also coming with a complete bankability analysis about the earlier three elements I mentioned, among others, in order to ensure de-risking of projects. So we are already in the field, and we are doing that. And as also, allow me to repeat, because I don't want to say a lot about this, that we already, during pandemic, we already tested about 9 projects, and we succeeded to save more than 470 megawatt, allowing for more than 2 million CO2 equivalent to be saved. So ITAF, when it was launched, was the anchor investment, announced was anchor investment of 400 million. Over past 2 weeks, we already signed with the Abu Dhabi Fund for Development, as well as new partner, which is Masdar. Masdar is one of the global 3 lead institutions as private sector investors in renewable energy, and they are coming with a new financial product, which basically equity investment as well as technical assistance for project development bankability. We also have in the pipeline two more banks who's coming in, basically Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and Inter-American Development Bank, and they are coming with more than 8 digits with their investment, but wouldn't allow to say that, giving the confidentiality of our discussion with them. But very quickly, there are specific value proposition that I need to highlight from the perspective of project developers and funding partners. Quite obvious, the key point here for value proposition is to minimize the transaction cost and the time cost. So we become more agile to scale up investment in a very short way, as recommended in the recommendation of the World Energy Transition Outlook, as Francesco was mentioning. The more important one is that the major part of the funding availability is coming within local banks and local developers. In order for IRENA to put the example as the transformational and demonstration project, we have to bring in, to increase the multiplier effect, as Ambassador Mohammed Abu Shahab mentioned today, that we are not looking for 1-to-1 multiplier effect, we are looking between 1 to 4 at least multiplier effect to increase. Money has to come at that time from local financiers. So we have basically from local banks as local developers. So we increase the skin in the game and minimizing the sharing of the risk among those countries. The other important point here is that basically to facilitate funding partners to have more financing flow by important factor, which is basically banks, when they will come in here, they will come basically with minimized shared risk profile. When they will see local financier or local government or local developers are coming in with more skin in the game or more share of responsibility or equity, then we will have more attraction and more factor of safety for the banks to come in. The final point that also takes time is basically about the financial matchmaking. We are also coming for the stage before due diligence, because due diligence is not for IRENA to do, it's for banks to do. And to do that, we are also minimizing the transaction time and the transaction cost, specifically for private sector, who are basically, again, as it was said today by all previous masters here, is that basically the fact that those financiers, they are also finding difficulties to work on, for example, in clearing the acquisition rights for land to put investment. So unless IRENA comes here and based on its knowledge and transforming it into real access support in the ground actions, I think that would be very important and value proposition. One final or two important final point before going to the end is exactly that. We are going to work across all spectrum of renewable energy technologies, including green hydrogen, which we already started to receive a lot of requests of support from African countries, or in most of time, they are not having all readiness eligibility criteria to be supported by ITAF. But we still receiving this interest to see how can we help them through general capacity building, which we do also from several IRENA other windows, but we're still doing that. The final important point here is that we are also working along all scale, medium, large scale, or mega support. And again, we do that with funding partners of ITAF, but even more on transactional based principles. We are doing that with other banks who are coming to be interested. My final point to complete my 7 points is basically the final slide. It's about eligibility criteria. The eligibility criteria that you see here is the generic one, not the project focused one. because this will come when complete all funding partners will be in a board that the IRENA Secretariat will be establishing, will be led by our DG among all funding partners. Because here we are going to work in a very two technical terms, what we call it parallel financing, decentralized management. Again, IRENA is not going to touch on the part of due diligence. The eligibility criteria is that we are working across the globe with more than 175 countries and is increasing more with more members comes to IRENA. In terms of technology, we are working on commercially proven projects and commercially proven technologies. And by the way, green hydrogen is already a proven technology in several countries, but the only new one is that the source of power generation comes from solar or wind or whatever energy technology. But in terms of hydrogen itself, it's already proven technology. The final point is that to make sure that we are aligning with three important elements. Number one, local environmental and social issues, as well as NDCs, Paris Agreement alignment, and Sustainable Development Goals. I'm sorry for being long, but that's basically in a nutshell, because I think my dear colleague Wilfred mentioned that we have to limit to 5 to 7 points. So I'm sorry to speak quickly, but just trying to match the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hamed, for providing more information on the ETAF platform, which we are sure is going to mobilize more resources for renewable energy. I now give the floor to Mr. Riccardo Puliti, the Vice President of the World Bank for Infrastructure. The World Bank has a long-standing expertise in financing sustainability projects, and we are sure that Mr. Riccardo Puliti is going to provide us with more insight on what the bank is doing. You have the floor, sir.
Wilfred, thank you very much. I found it a little bit odd to be called Mr. Riccardo Puliti. Everybody knows me as Riccardo. But anyway, I would like to say thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Director General, for the kind invitation. Thank you to Ahmed that consider me a master, because not even in my family they do. So it's a welcome change. So I'm Riccardo Puliti. I'm the Vice President for Infrastructure at the World Bank. So I cover energy, extractives, transport, digital, and public-private partnership. I have to say, I tend to agree to everything that was said today, in the sense that certainly renewables, and I'm thinking about new renewables, so especially wind and solar are the future for all of us, and I'm extremely pleased to see that the price is going down. I'm also very happy about technological innovation. His Excellency the Ambassador talked very nicely about COP27. COP28 will be in the United Arab Emirates, and I very much think about a COP about technological innovation. I mean, I can only think about companies like Masdar that will lead the innovation. So at the end, a lot of this battle for our planet will be won through technological innovation. That's what I strongly believe. As technological innovation that will also drive costs down and will make even more renewables the best and only option. But we are not there. So we have to move there. We have not there. If you look at a graph of the energy consumption all over the world, you can see the big role still played by coal, by gas, and et cetera, et cetera. So we will have to exit from coal in a way, as the State Secretary was saying of the Federal Republic of Germany, which is just. So let's not forget the word just, because if we don't have the support of the public opinion, it would be very difficult to move into an accelerated energy transition, which is at the end what we really want. So that's very important. COP27 will be the COP of Africa. I know you will talk about that. 52 people out of 100 in Africa do not have access to electricity. So let's think a little bit about that. No, it's not only about moving innovation, technology. There is a part of the world that doesn't have electricity at all. I leave alone about clean cooking, because there are around 2 billion people in the world that don't have clean cooking. Most of them are women, by the way. So it's something that we have to look very, very closely. We at the World Bank, I mean, we finance 5.6 billion every year in energy. Around 50% of that is in renewables, and 94% of that 50%, so more or less 2.7 billion is in renewable energy. However, and these are the however, I think that if we want to really push renewable energy, we must think about projects. Absolutely, project bankability. I come from investment banking, so absolutely yes. But we have to work, as it was said, and I think by Mr. Ambassador, it is necessary that the Multilateral Development Bank, they use more instruments like budgetary support instruments, in the case of the World Bank, DPF and P4R, in order to build legal and regulatory frameworks and planning, as the Director General was saying, that will allow for an accelerated introduction of renewables while keeping the energy system working. I'm a reformed engineer, so I'm an engineer by background and reformed, nevertheless. But I have to say, we have to think about systems. We cannot think about only one piece because, believe me, it does not work. It's all about integrating renewables as quick as possible and exiting polluting fossil fuels from the system as quick as possible while the system works. This is why I always say to my people, you know, I used to be the global director for energy. You know, being the global director of energy is like running and juggling 3 balls at the same time. So this is what it is. And I have to say, I agree 1,000,000% with the Director General. Many of our countries don't have the capacity to plan. And this is especially true in Africa, where the planning capability is very, very difficult. But it is difficult to plan. You have to think about the energy, the form of energy you will use in 20 years in a world where technological innovation is far quicker than that. So it's really a very, very difficult thing. So I agree that the World Bank is doing that. Since I was appointed 1 year ago, even more. We'll have to work more and more with countries to make sure that they do the right choice, and the right choice can only be informed by the SDG 7 and SDG 13, of course, in order to really move as soon as possible in a moment of big disruption of the energy markets. Let's not forget where we work. And let's not forget either that a lot of the funds that were invested in less developed countries, in or so-called emerging markets, now have gone back because the perception of risk is too high. That takes me to my second point, perception of risk, or risk, actually. So it is the work of the MDBs and and the bilaterals and others to de-risk projects, de-risk sector. In order to de-risk a sector, you need reforms, because sectors can only be de-risked if there is a predictable legal and regulatory environment which is also stable and that can attract private sector, because, Mr. Ambassador, I agree with you, private sector money is not necessary, it is utterly necessary. So we have to de-risk the sector, make sure that planning is well done in order to attract the sector. Then we have to de-risk projects. And that's where I think that the balance sheet of MDBs can be used in order to provide first loss, guarantees of every kind, payment guarantees, naturalization guarantees, equity guarantees, and so on and so forth, in order to make the projects more attractive to the private sector. I believe in sound banking, though. And I believe also that there are no free lunches for anybody. So the private sector will have to take their portion of risk. This is how financial markets work, and this is how it is done in a sustainable way. So very, very happy to help to make everything feasible in order to have not only bankable but transformative projects and have as much as possible projects with renewables. Very happy to work with IRENA. Very proud. I think, I shouldn't say so, but I think Francesco is doing an amazing job, but now let's keep it on the side. I mean, I have nothing more to add. I mean, it's really, it's quite complex at the moment. As I told you, energy markets are very much up, down, and what is happening in Europe is actually sending difficult messages to understand, for example, in Africa, where they say, well, I mean, you use coal, why shouldn't I use coal? So it's really a lot of work to be done. We have to win the acceptance of the local population, of governments, of all kind of players in order to accelerate the energy transition. That, by the way, must be just. I finish here, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. I'm not going to fall in that trap anymore. Thank you very much, Ricardo, for your useful contribution, and we look forward to our cooperation with the World Bank. I now give the floor to Ms. Cristina Duarte, USG and Special Africa. I hope that you are going to share with us some information about the SDG Fund. We also know that you were, in your past life, Minister of Finance of the Republic of Cabo Verde. So we hope that you are going to share also your experience on what could be the needs of African countries and developing countries in general. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Ambassador, my dear friend Francesco. Yes, I was Minister of Finance, and I'm proud to say that I led the first renewable energy project in Cape Verde, the first PPP in Cape Verde, which result in a renewable energy penetration rate of 26%. I'm going to use this opportunity to approach this from a policy-making standpoint, actually from an African policy-making standpoint. So, all protocols observed. Allow me to start by, of course, thanking IRENA and Mr. Ambassador. As you know, as we speak, Africa, and I'm only to talk about Africa, is the only thing I know. As I used to say, I know about Africa and about public debt, not more than that. So, as we speak, Africa has been hit by 3 crises: COVID, war in Ukraine, and climate. So, in this context, the implementation of Agenda 2030 and 2063 is at stake. We are not going to deliver by 2030. No way. We are not going to deliver. So in order to address this challenge, the Secretary General highlighted that we could not approach this new global crisis with a business as usual perspective and call on us, the UN entities, member states, stakeholders, to approach recovery in a new way. What does this new way involve? First of all, it requires approaching development not from a mechanical or operational perspective, but looking at it with a strategic mindset that helps us identify 3 critical components of transformative change: drivers, game changers, and enablers. It is important for us to approach this exercise also in a focused way, and I would say almost surgical way, because if you want to achieve a transformative change in a short period of time, and you don't have much time left, we need to concentrate our efforts on areas and issues that can really have a multiplying impact. So an investment of 1 that generates 10. In this regard, there is no doubt that energy is a key driver of development, from human capital to economic growth. And the lack of energy access in Africa is one of the causes that explain why the continent has suffered a greater impact than other areas of the world, despite the fact that the pandemic per se has been less severe. We are paying a huge opportunity cost for not having electricity in Africa, for being a dark continent. Furthermore, energy is crucial for industries, an indispensable asset for African countries to generate millions of jobs. We need to generate 18 million jobs annually. And this is on an accumulative basis, and you have not been able to do so. If energy access is the driver from an African standpoint for accelerating, fueling SDG implementation, there is no doubt that financing for development is the game changer. Without financing, we'll not be able to implement any ambitious plan. And in order to move towards the next level in energy access in Africa, we need to multiply the mobilization of funds. For example, Africa accounts for just 4% of global power supply investment, only. Achieving reliable electricity supply for all in Africa would require an almost fourfold increase, around 120 billion annual until 2040. How can we achieve such an increase? The reply is the same: changing perspective, changing our mindset. In this regard, it has often been said that one of the main problems of development finance is the scarcity of resources. Allow me to say that I disagree. There is enough money in the world to finance the implementation of all the agendas. The problem is not the absence of funds, it's that the money is not being used as it should be, and it does not benefit whom it should from a geographical, sector, and income perspective. This is particularly evident in Africa. The continent has the largest endowment of the minerals, metals, and inputs needed for the global green transition. It is home to countries that have over 70% of the world's cobalt deposits, the fourth largest lithium deposit in the world, not to mention generous endowment of nickel, platinum, bauxite, you name it. To finance Africa's imperative energy access and at the same time keep Africa as the greenest continent in the world, because this is not a zero-sum game, as the global narrative is pushing us to think, we need to be smart in using these resources as part of our domestic resource mobilization strategy. We need to understand that tackling domestic resource mobilization goes beyond mobilizing money. It is the only path for Africa to gain policy space and be in a better position to tap international capital markets without being unfairly treated by credit rating agencies. In this regard, investing in renewable energies in Africa as an important component of Africa's energy mix should not just be approached from the perspective of building power plants or establishing solar camps. We need to include in the portfolio investments on value addition, manufacturing renewable energy components such as solar panels, fuel cells, wind turbines, and batteries on the continent. This is how we can unleash the transformative economic transformation. In this puzzle, it should be clear to everybody that public finance and private finance are complementary. We need to abandon the mutual crowding out approach that traditionally considered that there were sectors for public investments and sectors for private investments. Or the opposite. We need to adopt a mutual crowding in approach. I said that there are enough funds in the world to finance the 2030 agenda. But this is only true if we adopt this mutual crowding in approach. The challenge then is how to mobilize private sector funds, how to make SDG investments attractive. In this context, the risking is the magic word. The risk involves, above all, the identification and activation of mitigants that make investments more attractive. Let me underscore up front that the risk involves much more than buying insurance, entering the derivatives and hedge instruments world, or hiring a financial consulting firm. The type of de-risking that I'm advocating for involves in many cases, and Ricardo has said that, structural changes, structural reforms to be delivered by policymakers. In other words, approach the building of institutional infrastructure as the best mitigant that Africa can activate it and change its risk profile. In this regard, we could talk of institutional de-risking. In the case of Africa, there are three important mitigants that need to be activated. First mitigant, strong country systems, particularly domestic resource mobilization systems. This involves creating solid policy frameworks, including integrated national financing frameworks that lay out the country's national strategy to raise resources, manage risk, and achieve SDG priorities. Structuring solid DRM systems is not only important to mobilize internal resources per se, and it is very important to understand this. DRM systems are also a de-risking tool as they provide assurance to private sectors that the public sector will be there to chip in, to play its role. In addition, we need to improve our energy and investment regulatory frameworks to minimize risk perceptions and incentivize various levels of the private sector. This is the mutual crowding in aspect that I was referring to. Second mitigants, a better and fair integration in the global value chains by African countries, and the active promotion of regional value chains. I mentioned before the need to approach energy investments from the perspective of job creation and Africa's industrialization as well. This is the better and fair integration in global value chains that I'm referring to. And in this context, the launch of the African Continental Free Trade Area 2 years ago is a great opportunity to advance in establishing solid regional value chains that provide an opportunity to African countries to add value to the global value chains. Speaking the regional value chains in energy is also speaking of the strengthening of regional power pools and increasing efficiency of grids to facilitate regional power trade and access. Enhanced regional energy interconnections will increase the attractiveness of any investment in energy power generation, contributing to the de-risking process. The third mitigant is to some extent a consequence of the other two, predictable and consistent cash flows. We need to bear in mind that private capital searches for predictable and consistent cash flows, and only market integration generates them. I have talked about a driver, energy, a game changer, financing. So it is now time to refer to the enabler that can make all of this happen. And this is where the international finance support platforms can play a crucial role. International finance mechanisms can become enablers, de-risking tools. How? By bringing in value that goes beyond money, such as knowledge, credibility, technical capacity, etc. As enabler, financing mechanism needs to unleash the power of financing for development by activating the mitigants I referred to so that the money flows to SDGs investments. In this regard, I would like to refer to the model of an enabler that the UN Secretary has launched with the support of several partners, the Joint SDG Fund. The Joint SDG Fund used the soft power of the UN, the most important knowledge hub in the world, to bring in financing from all possible and credible sources, such as banks, philanthropies, DFIs, private sector, and many more. In this regard, with just 10 programs and a budget of $114 million, this portfolio is expected to leverage $5 billion in financing for the SDGs. This is just a sample of what we can realize by changing the approach and promoting catalytic interventions as done through the Joint SDG Fund. I would like to conclude by inviting all participants today to embrace this approach and make the de-risking SDG investments a main goal of their investment strategies. If we'll do it, together we can mobilize the necessary funds to boost energy access and SDG implementation in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christina, for this very informative presentation. I now give the floor to Ms. Preeti Sinha, the Executive Secretary of the UN Capital Development Fund. We would be grateful if you could share with us your experience in terms of sustainable finance. You have the floor.
Thank you, Wilfred, and thank you very much to our host, His Excellency Ambassador Abu Sabah. Thank you to the government of Germany, and happy to call friends at IRENA, Francesco Ahmed, and to Her Excellency Mrs. Duarte. Also, when I was at the African Development Bank, we did the Kabyolika project together, wind power in Cape Verde. So I have to take you back to the world of banking because I'm a banker, which is something I share with Ahmed. So let me tell you a little bit about the UN Capital Development Fund, the work we're doing in energy, just really on the ground. I think I have a presentation, if somebody could put that up, or hopefully. So basically, the UN Capital Development Fund, that's it. This is our new strategic framework for the next 4 years. Just to say, in 1966, member states created a fund for the developing countries at the UN to do grants and loans. Now, this mandate has been, I would say, pretty dominant. We've focused mostly on our grants and technical assistance, the development part, but in a very focused manner. What we've brought to the front now is the capital mandate. So just the clean message that we do 6 product areas. We're doing grants, technical assistance, loans, guarantees, blended funds, and bonds. So there are many, many interesting comments I heard today. Perhaps we are trying to put on the ground, and we service the frontier markets, the least developed countries. But when we work with other UN agencies, we go beyond that mandate. And you'll see there that climate, energy, biodiversity has come up as a new area of focus. It was always there, but our big focus on digital and local infrastructure now complemented by energy. Next slide. So here you will see the investment continuum. So what we offer is a hybrid development finance approach. And I was just at the World Bank yesterday as well, working with partners. But basically, we are able to still do the grants, do developmental work, set policies, etc. But we are able to invest from our balance sheet into SMEs. Into local infrastructure, mid-size infrastructure. We leave the big infrastructure for our friends at the IFIs. We also leave the big SMEs to our friends at the DFIs. So we are that early part, the UN in some ways partnering with its member states, its core shareholders in some ways, to do early developmental work with an investment mandate so that they are able to progress on the next stage of the development, which Ms. Duarte mentioned so well. So we do loans from our balance sheet, and then we have created off-balance sheet instruments, the Build Fund, which is an SME investment fund, a blended finance fund, the IMF fund, another investment fund with our friend Thierry Dio, that many of you might know, a big infrastructure investor. So a fund for SMEs and a fund for local infrastructure. And we're very happy to say of the bridge, about 36% is in the clean energy space. So that's UNCDF in short. Next slide. I will now try to give you some specific examples of what we have done in the energy slide. I've already made this point that we work very much across the UN agencies trying to implement these instruments, not only with us, but WFP, UNDP for certain, our close partner, but other firms as well. And what happens is this takes the grant mandate a little bit further. We are able to leverage ODA. Next slide. Here we will give you an example of the energy project. So you can see our energy footprint is quite large. I would say we have about 80 projects in clean cooking stove and in renewable energy across the world, including in markets like DRC, which need it a lot, but across, as you can see. One example I wanted to give you in particular. So in Ethiopia, UNCDF and UNDP established a credit risk guarantee fund, which is administered by the Development Bank of Ethiopia. This fund provides 50% partial credit guarantee to enhance the lending of local financial institutions to rural energy technology providers. So by making this access, putting this guarantee on, the bank financing is then able to service at least 19 energy service providers, which sell over 500,000 cooking stove solar energy products. So in some ways, I was listening to all the times when de-risking was brought up. I'm a total believer of the same, but perhaps we have to start to look at the instruments and the actual examples that can kind of do that. Next slide. This is our local financing. So we have a team called the Local Finance Initiative, LFI, and here we are working with the local banks, I think Francisco, etc. One of you mentioned very much the work to do with local finance. So here, that's a pipeline of 133 investments, total value of 170 million. There are several challenges for constraints in the financial sector for domestic partners. The high cost to develop energy projects, low project developers, lack of access to domestic capital, unfavorable tariffs from the energy regulators still. So the LFI, this team, tends to unlock financing by local capital markets, by creating flows to the local markets. So through LFI, we go into solar, hydro projects that you see there, and we do that through investing in the local capital markets, either by guarantees, either by debt, providing debt into the market. And all of this is managed through a dual key pipeline, which captures not only the financing, but the impact. So that's some other examples on the ground. Next slide. So I mentioned I like to come very specifically to one example. This is in Gambia. I mentioned our bridge facility, our on-balance sheet loan facility. So here, basically in Gambia, our friends at UNDP identified an opportunity. We went to a multi-donor fund. I think Germany is part of that, the NAMA facility. And UNCDF has the capacity to issue the instrument. So we issued a guarantee onto a solar plant in Gambia for 10 megawatts. Which was a $9 million guarantee from the NAMA fund, which has attracted $15 million in an investor who will come and run the project. And the guarantee was for the risk of the off-taker. Basically, if the off-taker, the national off-taker would not take on the power. So therefore, you can see very much agreeing to that de-risking factor, but probably wanting to see more of it in action. Let me close. Last slide, please, I think. Exactly. So here are some of the recommendations we would like to have. How do we close the gap in the toughest markets that we serve? One, target at least half of Africa's frontier markets with an ambitious innovation as well as investment agenda, requiring both technical assistance and capital. Two, provide financial innovation that aims to crowd finance into the last mile markets, including aggregation and portfolio level matching with investors, receivable finance, renewable energy certificates, all that innovation. And certainly the ETAF fund will play a very valuable role in that. So congratulations on that. Three, play a stronger convening role between investors, local governments, incubators, data, industry associations, and certainly using the UN system, UN platform to make all of that happen. And then finally, push for a stronger energy forward. So also linking the need for energy, Ms. Duarte, you mentioned, certainly needed for productive uses, links to other sectors, agriculture, forest, etc. So we hope that this decade of action will be that. And the world is eager. People are eager. We are confident that the UN development system can make that happen with great partners represented here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sina. I think I'm going to take my seat for the benefit of those who participate online. We are running out of time, but I hope that we have a couple of minutes to take one or two questions. If we have someone in the room who would like to ask a question, I think that we have one question online that basically says what can developed countries do to close the financing gap. And I think that many presentations have provided an answer to that question. And we have also heard a lot about de-risking, which is a very important factor in financing renewable energy. And my understanding is that Hamed would like to say a word on that, about what IRENA is doing. You have the floor.
I don't know. It's working now. So for de-risking, actually, we are following project-based intervention. And actually, I would like to capitalize on what Ricardo and Briti mentioned, that we are using all type of de-risking elements, not only on project equity guarantee, project guarantee, or payment guarantee, or investment guarantee, but also we are working on more than this. We are working in the most critical part, which is the geopolitical de-risking of projects. This is exactly very important, specifically in most of African countries, and we rely here on our, again, knowledge, and I would like to highlight some kind of projects that we supported without giving details because of the confidentiality restrictions that we have with our investment partners coming from private sector. That basically we had to work on 250 megawatt project in Africa, in North Africa specifically, for onshore wind. And basically the issue here is that because of the time between financial closure and the award, that was basically under competitive bidding process, the price or the cost of megawatt have basically decreased. And basically the main partners here was basically one of MDBs. Also, I couldn't reveal more details into this, but the idea here is that we had to work on basically the equation of the guarantee by the guarantee agency, and we had to also to add more business partners who are offered basically what we call it bridge finance, in order to work on increasing the competitiveness of the price offered by the developers. It was very difficult, and I have to say, working on this kind of de-risking, that's not an easy job. It has to be handled case by case. Yes, it's really very easy to say, but to put in the ground, I believe that it's more on the risk on the private sector, but we had to save 250 megawatt. That costs the investor, and these are the numbers I could say. The investor to develop a project was more than $7 million. Imagine the investor was about to lose that after he basically awarded the project from the country, and the country said, sorry, this price I'm not going to accept anymore. And the reduction of the price went from almost $7 cent per kilowatt hour into 3.8. So it was really a big loss to the country or a big loss to the developers. And we had to work on. So what I would like to say here, and it's very important that yes, it's very easy, but implementing that, it has to be handled project by project. And I agree that transactional cost, the lower you go with the project investment, the higher investment cost. And here is the part that aggregating this investment or platform approach is very important. One final point to close onto this is that there are some new innovative approach we already going to use that basically we imitated from EBRD, that's called Green Economy Financing Facility. We are working with local banks, and I believe Ricardo knows that very well. The idea here is that we are using local finance in order to minimize the transaction costs through an aggregated projects. So whatever the project is going small or medium, not even large, we are going to work on the outreach of the local credit officers of banks, giving them the knowledge, and minimize the intervention of basically multilateral development banks up to the level of providing capital, even from the market. And that's easy. Basically, EBRD expended more than $20 billion, if I'm getting the number right, from EBRD. And we are doing that currently with several countries, basically in North and West Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hamed, for this answer, for your comment. We have more and more questions coming in our chat box. We don't have time to take them all, but we will take only one, which is as to Priti. The question is, what are the criteria to support the projects? So it's a very big question, I know. Maybe we can say a word or two.
So the criteria, actually, as the UN, we have to run public offers. So we run challenge funds. We put a set of criteria. As I said, we are very early stage where we feel it's the entrepreneurial drive which doesn't have access to capital. So not many criteria. We can do the grants first to get you on your feet, then the loan from our books. And so for example, let me give you, in Uganda, 2 Eritrean migrants came. They wanted to set up a solar plant, no access to finance. We gave them a grant. Later, they got 1.2 million from Stanbic Bank. So but just to say, happy to reach out to us, and you'll have to apply through a challenge competition, which we do very often. The other projects on the Build Fund and the IMF, which are off balance sheet, can be approached individually, and then those funds can invest in your companies? Thank you.
For your answer, thank you very much. We can't take additional questions, unfortunately, but we have participants requesting to get presentations, so we hope that you can share your presentation with our participants. That we can do by the end of the day. Once again, thank you very much for your participation. We have some snacks outside that will enable us to network and to prolong the discussion just for a few minutes, since I know that some have to leave for other obligations, other commitments. Once again, thank you very much for your participation, and goodbye. Thank you.